Hello, this is Kimberly Adams Mann with the Adams Mann team, and I am here with Russell Mann today, and we are here to talk about home inspections. Hello, Russell.
Hi, hello everyone.
And Russ is our buyer's agent for our team at the moment. We are looking to hire another buyer's agent for a bit, but maybe this recording you'll be seeing it later when we're not hiring, but we're always looking for great people to work with. So that'll probably be a constant thing for us. But we want to talk with Russ today because he primarily handles the buyers, and we want to talk about the buyer side of a home inspection. So Russ, tell a little bit about what that has to do with you as a buyer's agent. How do you handle that?
Okay, so when we've managed to get an accepted offer, then we go over the different aspects of the offer and any contingencies. And one of those contingencies, most people request a home inspection. So then we have several home inspectors that we can recommend, or sometimes they bring someone in that they've worked with in the past.
Okay, so would you say that the best way to find a home inspector is to just ask around and ask friends? Or is it better to ask somebody like yourself as a buyer's agent, and why?
Well, I would always recommend asking your agent, because as an agent, we haven't just worked with a home inspector on one occasion like most homeowners have. Even though you may have had a great experience with a home inspector, it's a one-off occasion to most people, or at least several years since you last done it. Whereas we're in constant contact with these home inspectors, we use them on a regular basis, so we get to see who are good and who aren't as good for our needs. And so that's why I always recommend going to your agent and asking who they recommend.
Okay, and what are some great things that people should look for in a home inspector that's not only a help to them, but also a help to the transaction? So for example, like, the report or things of that nature, what are some things that you would look for to say, hey, this is what makes a great home inspector?
Well, I always look for the fact that the home inspector is firstly very thorough in what they do. They give a comprehensive report, that they include photographs of any problems that they encounter, so you can easily identify them to the listing agent when you're asking for any amendment to be done, any fixes to be done, but also just in case you want to use it as a reference guide later, if it's something that you haven't asked to be fixed in the transaction, but you can use it as a list when you're going through your home. Okay, I need to do this, I need to do that, and here's a picture that shows me exactly the part that I need to fix.
Yeah.
And so it's always a good reference guide. And thirdly, I think a good timely report. So in other words, not taking days to get it back to the agent or the buyer, but actually within 24 hours, so that we can have that meeting. Generally, I schedule a buyer's meeting to go over the home inspection the day after the inspection. And the home inspectors that I recommend always have that report back to me within 24 hours. So, we can do that.
Right. I know when I bought my house, or our house actually, because it's the house we both live in now, obviously, but I bought it prior to you being over here. Whoop, I just moved that camera a bit. I know that for me, it was a punch list. I wasn't actually asking the seller to make any fixes on the house, because I just negotiated other parts. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But I know for me, it was a great punch list to use of the things that needed to be done. In fact, when I bought the house, I thought I was going to need to put on a new roof. And that was the one thing that they pretty much said I didn't have to do right away. So that was kind of cool, because it was one less thing I needed to do right away.
Yeah.
What does a home inspector actually do in a transaction?
Okay, so the home inspector they'll walk around the outside of the house looking for any faults that are there. They'll be checking electrical, if there's any outside electrical, to see if they're GFCIs, whether they've got their covers on. that there's no hanging wires, that the brickwork is in good condition, etc. They will then climb up on the roof, and they'll check the roof. Obviously, if there's snow on it, then they won't be going up there.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, and in fact, they probably wouldn't be able to see what was up there anyway.
Yeah, but they're a general inspection, so they'll go through things like your electrical, they'll test all your sockets, but they're not a specialist in any one field. So sometimes you may have to call in, they will recommend that you call in a specialist inspector just for them articles that come up.
Sure. So what information does a buyer need to have on hand when they call that home inspector to make that appointment and to get that ball rolling?
Okay, so they obviously need the address.
The house they're buying.
Otherwise the inspector can't find it. They need to let them know what agent they're working with so that they can be kept in the loop. And they also need to tell them what type of loan profile they have, because sometimes the loan will differ the way they look at a property. They will point out certain things, i.e., for instance, if it's an FHA loan or a VA loan, they have certain requirements that a conventional loan isn't important. It still means that they will show those up, but it may not be important as part of the transaction.
Right. And obviously, another thing I know that I've always had asked people to do is ask your home inspector if they test the appliances, because some home inspectors will not test dishwashers or stoves, or they won't turn them on at all. They'll just say, yep, they're here.
Correct. Yeah, they will want to know what appliances are included in the house, in the purchase. Obviously, if, for instance, if the washing machine and tumble dryer are not staying, they don't need to test them.
Absolutely.
If they are staying, they may test them. They'll certainly, if anything's staying, the home inspectors that we recommend would generally take down details of the serial numbers, and they run them through a check-in process to see if there's been any recalls on those appliances as well.
Yeah, so even if they're not testing it, at least they're checking for recalls, which is an excellent extra service that our home inspectors offer, which is one of the reasons why we work with them. So here's a question. Who does the home inspector actually work for?
The home inspector is actually employed by the buyer. They're the ones paying the fee. And the buyer actually has to tick off a box on the form that they're given to fill out to allow us to be copied in on the reports. So yeah, they're actually working for the buyer.
So this is why it's important for the buyer to do the scheduling, and why the buyer is the one that has to call them. Like, we can give them we can give them some recommendations as to home inspectors, but the buyer ultimately themselves is the one who has to call, make that appointment, and schedule that service. So that's why it's really important. But now here's a question. Does the buyer need to attend the home inspection?
Well, we always recommend that they attend, because then they can ask questions at the time. As something comes up, our home inspectors that we work with are great at walking the buyer around, explaining things, explaining how things work. Even if there's not a fault on it, they will explain the importance of what these things do and what to look for in the future. And so it's a great way of learning more about the house that you're buying with the home inspector to explain these things. And they always recommend that you ask questions. But if you can't make it, then that's not, that's no bad thing. If you can't get away from work, the important thing is that you get it done as quickly as possible, because we have a short window where we have to do any negotiating, any repairs, any quotes. Because don't forget, if we ask the seller to fix anything, sometimes they may have to get 1 or 2 or even 3 quotes on that. That can take time. So we don't want to leave anything until the last minute.
Yeah, because that can actually cause it to fall apart. I mean, you may still love the house, but with repairs, and sellers are more likely to do those repairs if you give them time to actually quote it out and find out how much it's going to actually cost them. They're more likely to actually go through with it because you've at least given them time and given them an opportunity to do their due diligence, so to speak.
Yeah, and you don't want to send in, an amendment on a Friday after the home inspection and expect them to have the quotes and everything back by the Monday.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
you've got that weekend to get over. So at least give them a few days, maybe to the Wednesday. That gives them a chance to get quotes in and decide which quote they want to go with, if at all.
Yeah, and I know with most of our transactions, we like to put in a 15-day window for home inspection, although sometimes it's 10 days. But really traditional for us is a 15-day. I think that's what's crash printed as the default for the state of Wisconsin in the contract. So if we didn't put a number in, 15 days is the default. But because let's assume that 15 days is that number, then when should we have that home inspection completed by?
I think within the first week, if we can get the inspection done within the first 7 days, that gives us a good 8 days afterwards to go over it with the buyer. Because let's face it, the buyers can't always, if they lead a busy lifestyle, work schedules and stuff like that, they may not be able to come and see and speak to you the day after. It may be 2 days after. So we need as much time as possible so that we can then study the report, go over it with the buyer, and then decide on what fixes are important. What are we going to ask them to fix, if at all?
Yeah, and I think it's really important, especially if the buyer can't attend the inspection, that also gives them time to call their inspector and talk to them one-on-one. We've talked about this before, I know, where sometimes people will send somebody else to the inspection in lieu of them, which we don't recommend people do, because then you get this Chinese whispers thing going on, because your friend who attended on your behalf then tells you the information instead of it coming directly from the inspector, who is the professional.
Yeah, we've had that on previous occasions where, a
A well-meaning
family
person,
member attended.
somebody well-meaning. It's not somebody that wants to
Oh,
hurt.
yeah. Oh, well-meaning, but they turn around and says, "Oh, you don't want to buy this house because it's got this error on it." And when I checked up with the home inspector, he says, "Oh no, it was just a fuse that's oversized." But the person who attended was saying the electrical's all messed up, we need new electrical throughout the house. It turned out it was an oversized breaker that had been put in, and they just had to change the breaker out. That was the only problem.
And the seller was, I know on that transaction, I know which transaction you're talking about as well. And I know in that transaction, they were almost going to walk away from the house because of what their well-meaning relative was telling them. And when it came down to it, the seller was quite willing to fix the problem and did fix the problem. And they were,
and they're still living in the house today. So it closed okay, and they're happy with their house. We're still in touch with those people, and they love it. So.
Absolutely. They especially love the garage where he does a lot of car work. And I know they're really using their backyard because he's apparently taken up smoking meats this year. So so obviously they love their.
We haven't tasted it yet, though.
I know. He hasn't invited us. Here's another question. So if the buyer's not attending the home inspection, does my agent have to attend the home inspection?
No, the agent doesn't have to attend. In actual fact, we don't always have the time to. I generally go for the first half an hour to an hour to introduce them, to make sure that a buyer is comfortable with the home inspector. And I would generally stay there for, a small period of the time, because let's face it, a home inspection can take 3, sometimes even longer, 3 hours or more. And so, we can't afford to be there for the whole time, although sometimes I do. If it's a particular buyer that you need to nurture through that process, then on occasions I have stayed for the whole thing.
Yep.
But we get the comprehensive report and we read from that. So.
And I also know that if somebody is a newer agent, they're more likely to stay through the whole inspection, which I think is fantastic because then they learn and they learn a lot more. And I know when I first started, I went to every single home inspection and I stayed for the whole home inspection so that I could learn from those home inspectors, partly to help inform my sellers, but also just to inform myself. And I know, Russ, you did the same thing.
Yeah, I did the same thing. For probably the first year, I went to every home inspection and stayed the distance with them. It built up a great rapport with the home inspectors. I got to know them really well and which ones I like to work with. And B, it gave me so much knowledge so that I understand what I'm looking for. When I'm walking a person through a home for the first time when we're on a showing, I know I'm not an inspector, but I know what I'm looking for.
Right.
And so that's a great help, before we even get to calling in a home inspector. I'm looking, are there cracks in the basement walls? Are the window frames rotting out? I know what to look for on those certain things. And so it's been a great help to me getting to know these home inspectors and staying for the full inspection.
Sure. And even just knowing the difference between a high efficiency furnace and a non-high efficiency furnace. While you can't maybe say whether the furnace is working or not, you can tell the difference based on the piping that comes out of it. And that's kind of great knowledge that we have on this.
Correct.
Last question for this little module is the seller or the seller's agent going to be at that home inspection? What do you think?
No, I've never encountered a seller's agent being at the home inspection. Sometimes they're insisted on being there to gain access sometimes because, if the seller has insisted that any showings are done with the seller's agent being present, but I haven't encountered that myself on, up till now.
But sometimes sellers are at the home inspection, and in that case, I mean, we do discourage it, and absolutely as a buyer, we want you to be able to speak freely with your home inspector, and sometimes that can be a little bit harsh because if the home inspector is going to be completely honest with you and the seller is sitting right there, that can be a little bit awkward. So
it can be a bit awkward. I have had the seller stay at a home inspection before, and that wasn't very good. He was he tended to say way too much for his own interests. It was good for our point because we was able to reduce the price quite a bit more because of that, because they divulged information way and above what we needed or what the inspector had seen. So
yeah, and it wasn't necessarily stuff that was a defect, but you were able to leverage that, which is why as a listing agent, I will tell my sellers, do not be there because it's not always about that. I told a seller recently, don't be at the home inspection because he was a really great guy, but a little bit sarcastic. I said, because you might say something as a joke and they might think you're being serious.
Yeah.
Because, and so it can be something that it's not even necessarily truth and they're not trying to hide something. It can be something that is just taken in the wrong way. So it's really not good for a seller to be there. Just my little caveat as a listing agent, sellers don't attend those home inspections. Let the buyers have that time with their inspector if they can. All right, and they're gonna end this module and they're gonna move into a next one here in just a minute. But this has been Kimberly Adams-Mann and Russell Mann of the Adams-Mann team here at Shore West Realtors. And we'll be back with part 2 here in a moment.
See you soon.